How we doing? My name is Viti. I am the head distiller here at Peach Street Distillers. We have been open since 2005. We are currently Colorado's oldest and longest running independently owned distillery in Colorado. And we are also the first distillery in Colorado to ever produce a bourbon. So we currently have the oldest bourbon aging right now, which is at 12.8 years. So we're really excited about that. Everything we do here in Palisade is going to be locally sourced to make all of our spirits. The corn, which will sit in a silo outside, holds about 35,000 pounds of Palisade local corn, field corn. We will then auger it into SpongeBob, which is our little corn holder right there. Once I start the day off, I will fill up this corn cooker above me, get that water up to about 200 degrees, and then we are going to start augering up our milled corn on top of that. We will let that corn sit for about 90 minutes to let that conversion of starch to sugar really complete itself. After the 90 minutes, we will then drop it down into our dairy tank. We actually converted this dairy tank from an actual dairy farm to our mash tun. So we'll gravity fill this, and at this time the corn is going to be sitting at about 170 degrees. We're going to get that down to about 164 before we start putting on our barley, wheat, or any of our grains, depending on the recipe we have. So if we come over here, you'll actually be able to see our mill and a couple of our grains. So right here we got our field corn. But then we got our raw rye, so this is going to be our bourbon recipe. We use 60% corn, 20% raw rye, and then a 20% two-row base malt. But this is where the mill comes in handy, because we obviously want to turn this husk into a more powderized version. So we want to open up all that starch so we can get the best and most efficient conversion possible. So that's where this mill comes in. We'll start milling, and it is a 2-roller mill, and it'll auger all the way up on top, and it'll go right down into the dairy tank and start to homogenize and mix with the corn itself. After I'm done with that, we will let that sit in the dairy tank for 1 hour. That hour is called our saccharification rest, and that's where we're gonna have our biggest and main conversion of starch to sugar in our dairy tank right there. So after that hour, we will completely, immediately cool that down to stop the conversion as fast as possible. And once that conversion stopped, we're good to go. Once we get it to about 100 degrees, that's where we're gonna start to hydrate our yeast. The yeast will hydrate for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll pitch or put it inside the dairy tank, let it mix up, and then that's where we're gonna start pumping into one of our open top fermenters right here. Awesome, so once we're gonna start pumping over our mash into one of our open top fermenters here, we're gonna reach a volume of at about 800 gallons per time. And once the yeast is active inside the ferment, what it's gonna start doing is, the yeast is a living cell organism. It is gonna start to eat the sugar and convert that to an ethanol or ethyl alcohol and a natural CO2. So that's why a lot of times in distilleries you see open top fermenters, is because we have our own healthy protectant layer of that CO2 to help with any infections or bacteria trying to enter into our mash. Luckily we don't have any problems with that, but if you guys come over here, you can actually pop up and see what an active ferment looks like. Definitely recommend getting up there. Here, I'll put this. Well, our tequila, but we can't call it, obviously we can't call it tequila in the States because we're not in Mexico. But agave spirit, yeah. So, but we do get our agave spirit, excuse me, straight from Jalisco, Mexico. So we get it right from the source, and this is what it's going to be looking like. You're actually going to see a lot of motion in there, and that's all natural from the CO2. I mean the yeast, excuse me, which is the CO2. So we can get up there, you can actually see it rolling, and that's, we're not doing anything with that. And this is our pear in the bottle. So we actually will grow our pear over the season of about 3 months. We grow that pear in the glass bottle for about 3 months. Once it is done, we will pick all of those bottles off the tree. This year we did about 1,200 bottles, and we got about 875, almost 900 bottles. So we got a really good turnaround this year. After we're done, we will hand clean every single one of them individually, shake them out, rinse them, and currently they are pickling right now with a our goat vodka and some citric acid. So we do a very more natural way of preserving these, just to cause them to, or hope that they just do not oxidize or get any funky in the bottle. And then we will fill them with our aged pear brandy. Actually, last year, fun fact, we won the ACSA's in the whole nation. We won best in class for our pear brandy. So super proud of that, and we're very proud of this product. So it's really fun. Oh, okay, yeah. And then, yeah, so this is our finished product with the pear in the bottle. And this is our about 3 and a 4 year aged 2 barrels that were aged. We did a combination. We did 2 barrels. So this is a barrel blend of our pear brandy. I can really get you a real sample out of the barrel if you really want.
Cheers, cheers.
Cheers, guys. It's our Colorado straight bourbon. That's a blend of 10 different barrels. All right, I'll come over here.
Ready.
Cool. So welcome back to our packaging post-production area right now. So in this room, we are going to be filtering, mixing, bottling, labeling everything, and packaging, getting it ready for our consumers. So this is definitely a huge step in what we take a lot of pride in, because this is what the customer is seeing, and this is what they, are visually, getting attracted to. So when we bring a spirit in, it's going to be at a very high proof. We need to bring that proof down so it's not only drinkable, but it's also what our label says, so it's legally able to go out. So that's where this tank right here is going to come in. That is a reverse osmosis tank. So it's reverse osmosis water, some of the most cleanest, purest filtered water that you could possibly introduce to our spirits without adding any groundwater. So we will do a equation and depend on how much we add to the spirit to get it to where we want it and what our label says. After we're done, we'll send them up to those top 2 Grundies up top, and those are our bottling Grundies. We will pressurize those tanks. Those tanks are going to be pressurized, and then you will follow this line down, and then this is where it's going to start to see its first and second filter. We got 1 filter there, 1 filter here, so it will be a 2 filter inline system. Product will come in here, it'll filter, come out, and then go right into our bottling hopper. So everything back here is pretty much done by hand. They will take a bottle, they will put it on these little udders there, if you will, and this will fill up to a designated spot that we allow it to. And after we're done with that, we'll take it off once it's filled. We will then place a cork on top, bring this bad boy over here. We'll give it a capsule, and then if you look right there, there is our license number, which is 001. And then after this is on, we will put it in our heat sealer, and that will actually seal the capsule right there. And then this is where we put it on our label. This is that's our 10-year single malt right there.
Really?
Yeah, that's what we're going to be releasing very soon. And then that is a 11-year single malt. So super proud of that. These are going to be charred oak barrel. Has to be a charred oak barrel. Has to be white oak. No, it does not need to be American oak. It has to be aged for at least a minimum of 2 years to be a straight bourbon. So there's a lot of stipulations. To call it a bonded, have you ever heard of like bottled and bond? Mm-hmm. So bottled and bond is the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897. The president at the time, Grover Cleveland, passed the law essentially protecting the integrity and the quality of bourbon, because a lot of moonshiners were making moonshine out of whatever and then putting artificial flavors, coloring, and trying to pass it off as bourbon. And the big guys who were in Kentucky were like, nah, we're not doing this. So a couple little like rules that are different with bonded, it gets even more strict. Same things that I just told you about all the corn and everything, but has to be aged for at least 4 years instead of 2. Has to be made by a single distiller and a single distillery under the same roof in the same season. And it also has to be at 100 proof, no higher, no lower. So those are like, it gets very, very particular and to the point, very strict. So, but luckily we abide by it. So yeah, like I said, this is our hybrid pot still. This is going to be our main still. This will hold 400 gallons, so half of our fermenters that were in there will fit in here. Essentially, the most basic explanation is there is active ethanol or ethyl alcohol inside the mash, and when you're distilling, what you're doing is pulling out vapors from the mash. So it's going to go from a liquid form to a gaseous form, and those vapors are going to climb up, go over the that spirit pipe. They're going to drop down to the first bubble plate. So all of those ports right there, those are called bubble plates. So those vapors will start off at this first bubble plate right here. It looks like a dome like this. There's an opening, then there's like a little moat of water up there. And what's happening is every time those vapors pass through, it's almost essentially a filter. It is taking out your oils that you don't want, any off flavors that you don't want, and it's also separating your water from the actual pure ethanol. So that way you're not getting a watered down product, and that's where that water will fall back down, go right back into our boil, and then that's where and that's called a reflux. And when that constant motion is going to be happening the whole time, is that constant reflux of it trying, going up, trying, and then once it gets all the way to the top, those vapors are going to then cross over, and then this is our condensing column. So that copper pipe is inside, very small copper tubing, and then is surrounded by cold water. So when a gas or vapor hits something that's cold and not in the same temperature, it's going to liquefy and condense down. So that's where we're out of here. This is where we're going to start getting our product. This little guy right here is called a parrot, like a bird. And in distilling, this is pretty much goes for pretty much every distillery. We'll make 3 cuts, or areas where we want to hold and discard certain certain alcohols depending on the actual time or temperature of the still. So the first spirit that's going to come off the spirit pipe here, or the parrot, is going to be our heads. Heads is filled with methanol, a lot of nasty off flavors in there, can be volatile at some points, could be even poisonous if you have a high concentration of it. Luckily we don't, because we have very healthy ferments and a very technologically advanced system, so we don't really have to worry too much, but we do get bad flavors. It tastes like burnt rubber, kind of plasticky. Once the heads are done, I will collect about 2 gallons of that, and it'll start to turn sweet. And then that's where we're gonna start getting our ethanol. Ethanol that's what's all called our hearts. Our hearts is what we keep, it's what we love, it's the heart of the distillation. As I'm distilling, this hydrometer will be floating to tell me the proof as I'm distilling. So there's obviously only so much active alcohol that can be present in a ferment. So there's only so much that we can pull out of there. So as it starts distilling, the proof is going to lower and lower because there's not as much work we already pulled out so much. So after it gets down to a certain point, we're going to collect tails. Tails is the ass end of the distillation. Tails are still good. They are just a more watered down version of your heart. So you're going to get a little bit more oils in there, and it's a little bit more watery and a lower proof. So after I'm done, I will empty that still. We have a local farmer about 10 miles away from here. They come and pick up all the grain for us. They feed it to the cattle on the ranch and keep all those cows fat and happy. Plus it helps us to recycle, and it goes to a good home. But after I'm done cleaning that out, I will then put these tails right back into that into the still, and then put a new ferment on top, and then redistill. Because this is still good active alcohol, I just have to clean it up. And that's what's happening with the tails. I just put it right back in, and then we can redistill it. So this is our gin still, and this is called an Olympic still right there is the name of it. But we call it the onion because it looks like a big onion. And little fun fact about gin, gin is made from vodka. That's how gin is made. So we will fill vodka up to here at about 100 proof. And I will put my botanicals that will float or macerate on top of the vodka for 24 hours. And then the next day I'll come in and fire it and start to collect a concentrated, or a gin concentrate. With our gin, we use coriander, local juniper berry from Colorado, Italian juniper berry, orris root, angelica root, and licorice root. Then we also use a little bit of cinnamon and then 2 zest of lemon and lime. So our gin is a lot more citrus forward, a little bit more sweeter. It's not as dry as some gins can be. So a lot of people do like our gins for that reason if they aren't a gin drinker, because we have our gin's very palatable. So that's where our gin is made. And then if we come on over here, this is hot, so just be careful. You can touch this, but just... So this is our vodka still. With our vodka, we do distill it 3 times. And the reason that we distill it 3 times is because legally we have to get vodka to 190 proof off the still or higher. So we do our first one on the big guy, and then this is where our second and third run will go on here. So instead of it going through 5 ports, this vodka will be going through 22 ports per second distillation. We let this run overnight. We go very low and slow on our distillation. So this will take usually about 18 to 22 hours. After I'm done collecting in here, I will then put this product right back into the still, top it off with a little bit of water, and then run it again for another 18 to 22 hours. And then that is our final product, which is called a polish, vodka polish. We will usually get off the still at about 192, and it's ready to be proofed down and filtered and ready to drink at that point. So. And then a lot of people ask, why do we use copper? Copper's a great heat conductor. It's also a softer metal, so it's easy to manipulate and actually change it to how you want your copper or still to look. But the biggest reason why we use copper in distillation is because there's active sulfur inside of our mashes. So the copper will actually chemically bond with the sulfur and leave that behind, so we do not get any sulfur in our product. So here's our rick house. During the winter seasons, we actually open up the rick house for seating in here. As you can see, we do have our seats in here, but normally this rick house would be filled pretty much to the brim, about 400 barrels of Colorado straight bourbon. Like I said, our oldest bourbon currently, which is the oldest in Colorado, is in here, and that is at 12 years and 8 months, and we're going to be releasing that in about 15 years, we hope. But we'll see what happens. Right now you're looking at a lot of the babies. Those are kind of newly filled, as you can see. And we're going to talk a little bit about Angel Share and Devil Share. Angel Share, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to smell through the phone, but Angel Share is pretty much what you're smelling right now. It is the spirit of the angels. It's what gets evaporated out of the barrel. So in the first year, when we're aging and I fill up a brand new barrel, I lose 20% volume in the first year just by evaporation. So we do lose a lot, but this is where Devil Share is kind of fun and gets involved. So Devil Share is what gets soaked and left into the actual staves and left over. As you can see right here, all this like browning right here, and it almost looks like molasses coming out right here as well. That's all natural. That is a chemical reaction of the sugars in the wood and the bourbon itself, and they cause this almost natural like sealant. It'll actually seal its most vulnerable spots. And then after the year, we have a nice swelling of the wood, and so it starts to expand and tighten up, and then that way we only lose about 1 to 3% of volume every year after that first year. We do not roll our barrels here. We actually rely heavily on our desert climate to help with our aging process. So if in the desert, we get really cold at night. And so what that's gonna do is that's gonna harden up those staves, and then all that Devil Share is gonna be pushed out back into the bourbon itself. But then, just like a desert, you know, after it starts to heat up in the day, those staves are gonna start to open up and get a little bit more warm, and then that bourbon goes right back into those staves. So we constantly have this in and out, and that's what you want. You want this bourbon to be hitting as much surface area of this barrel as possible and going in and out to get as much flavor and phenols and all of your age coloring. Everything will go into this aging process. We do use a number 2 char. There's 4 chars that you can use on your barrels, 1 being your lightest char, 4 being your darkest. We use a number 2 because we want to elongate our maturation process. We want it nice and slow and calm and really let these bourbon get as much contact with these barrels for a long time. That way we really get a consistent and heavily flavored product that we really can be proud of, and we are. And that's why we've always used number 2 for our consistency and for what it does to our bourbon over the longevity. Cheers.